Miami's Community News, and today we're going to be talking about all things mosquitoes. And our guest today is Michael Mut from the Miami-Dade County Mosquito Control Division. Thanks for coming in.
Hey, Michael. Thanks for having me on again.
So lots of times people think, well, it's a cold weather that the mosquitoes disappear, right, forever. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So as we all know, there was a really intense cold front that went through, actually two of them. They came through the area, and temperatures hovered in the 40s and 50s for a little while, which was really nice. But now that that's gone through, mosquitoes, they're back. They don't really ever go away. They're, unfortunately here we don't get any breaks because we are warm and subtropical. So the mosquitoes are around.
But there are mosquitoes that are alive and well in very cold areas. Not the ones here, but around the world. That's true.
Generally speaking, when the temperature goes below 50 degrees, mosquitoes they don't entirely go away. It doesn't exactly wipe them out completely. They go into what's called a stasis, where they kind of just become inactive. They kind of freeze, kind of like the lovely iguanas that fall out of the trees. That same sort of concept. Because they are cold-blooded, they just kind of shut things down.
And people think the iguanas are laying on the ground. They're really alive. Their heart rate's very slow. The respirations are very slow.
They're not quite dead.
And they will, by the way, both of them, they will bite you.
Yes, they will. That's right.
So a year or two ago, I challenged you to put your hand into a box, a clear plastic box filled with mosquitoes, and you did that. Your hand went from white to black in about 2 minutes.
Yes, it did.
Okay. Then you told me the news about not being bit too much. So tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I think what you're referring to is that time that I did stick my hand into a cage of about 500 mosquitoes.
Yes.
And yeah, it very quickly turned black because these mosquitoes, we keep them hungry. And at that point, we were raising them inside the lab to study them. Essentially, what we were doing was testing the effectiveness of our pesticides on them. So to do that, you have to raise them. And the reason I did it was not only just because of it was for scientific reasons, but also I knew that these mosquitoes had never been out in the wild, had never been exposed to any kind of virus. So it was relatively safe, a little painful, but pretty much for the most part safe to do.
So when you talk about raising them, what's the lifespan before you try the pesticides on them? What's the lifespan of a mosquito?
Yeah, before I answer that, maybe Rachel, you can drop a link to that video into the description so that people can see what we're talking about and they don't think we're crazy. But so getting back to the life cycle of a mosquito, anywhere between 10 and 20 days is the general rule of thumb for the species that live here. It is the females that tend to live a little longer than the males, and again, it depends on the species, but about 20 days, about 3 weeks is a good rule of thumb.
So for most of us, what we're concerned with is, I don't want those little guys to bite me. That's the big deal. Stay over there, and if I walk near you, don't come after me. Yeah. So let's talk about what a resident in Miami-Dade County can do to reduce the bites and the annoyance.
Sure. To be clear, Michael, not every mosquito that bites you is going to necessarily be carrying a disease. There are only certain species that vector these viruses. Others, for the most part, do not. The one that's most common here in Miami-Dade County is called the black salt marsh mosquito, and that mosquito does not vector diseases in humans. So that's more of a nuisance biter. It's more of a problem to be annoyed and not being able to enjoy the outdoors. But as far as what residents can do, the biggest thing that mosquitoes need is standing water. And what I mean by that is if you have pots and plants outside planters, if you have decorative fountains, if for some reason you have a hole in your backyard that tends to flood when there's rainfall or irrigation, those are the types of environments that mosquitoes are looking out for. So those are the ones that you want to eliminate. We got some rain yesterday and over the weekend, so now might be a good time to go outside and check your yard and make sure that this rainwater hasn't accumulated in buckets or in I know that Abuelita likes to save the rainwater and put this, use this water to water her garden, but it's generally not a good idea to do that because it will attract mosquitoes. Mosquitoes will find those sorts of bits of standing water, and they'll reproduce in them. So it's important to get rid of the standing water to disrupt the life cycle.
Right. So if somebody in Miami-Dade County has a bucket outside and the mosquito lays an egg in that, so tell people where the egg is laid and how long it takes for it to hatch.
For most species, the mosquito will lay the egg beforehand, knowing and anticipating where the water is going to rise to. And so once the water does hit it, the mosquito egg hatches within 1 to 2 days. Then it'll exist as a larva in its larval stage for about 2 to 3 days. Then it'll molt and become a pupa, which it kind of resembles a little comma wiggling around. That'll stay there for about 2 days, and then it'll emerge as an adult after about 10 total days.
So the mosquito figures out where the water is going to go to, but in the meanwhile, it doesn't hatch until the trigger. The trigger is that it gets wet.
Right.
How long can it live? How long is the egg viable until the water gets up?
It could be a couple of years. There's been some eggs that we found have been viable up to 5 years sitting there in the wild.
So here are the mosquitoes, great annoyance. They've survived hundreds of millions of years, and they're smart enough to know, don't put it in the water in the lake, but put it nearby so that when the lake goes up, it's going to hatch, but far enough away that the critters aren't going to eat it.
Right, or lay it on top of the mangrove in the tendrils that are above the water, because they know that once the water rises, the eggs will get, they will encounter the water, they'll hatch, and the life cycle will begin again.
So let's talk about some of the diseases that are common down here in South Florida, and what people can, what should they watch out for, and then what I'd like to talk about is the trap system that the county has.
Sure. The biggest disease that we've got our eye on, and that's not to say we're not concerned, and that's not to say that people should panic, but it is dengue. Dengue is a virus that's transmitted by the same mosquito that transmitted Zika in 2016. So it is an invasive species called Aedes aegypti. So dengue, it travels around in the mosquito. It's using the mosquito as a host. And what happens is when the mosquito draws blood from someone who has the dengue virus, the virus itself comes into the mosquito. And then when that mosquito bites another human being who does not have the virus, that's how it's introduced. So it's the saliva that's being injected carries the virus in. The blood that comes out is how the virus comes out of the host and into the mosquito.
So tell us about mosquitoes and horses.
Mosquitoes and horses.
Yes.
Well, they again, just like birds and some species, like some dogs and cats, they do serve as hosts for these viruses. So a horse is a warm-blooded animal, which means it's going to attract the mosquito. The mosquito bites the horse. The same process applies, where the saliva that's being injected into the horse is what introduces the virus. And then if in an infected animal, if a horse is carrying Eastern equine, that virus that is common amongst horses, if it is present in the horse, it comes back into the mosquito when the mosquito draws the blood, and then the mosquito goes on and bites a human or another horse, and that's how the cycle continues.
There's been notable conversations about the bird flu. Explain if there's any connection to mosquitoes with that.
Bird flu?
Yes.
That's a subject I'm not really well versed on, so I'm not really comfortable talking about. If anyone wants any information on bird flu, I suggest you contact the Florida Department of Health or even the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Those are two excellent sources.
Yes. And sometimes when I watch it, it gets a little spooky. It's like, what does all this stuff mean? And for the novice, it's like, how do you get that?
It could be frightening, but I'd like to go back to dengue, and I would like to share a little bit of good news. Dengue is essentially infections in humans. They're categorized two ways. One is local transmission, and another would be travel. And so really the big problem now that we're having is travel cases, because you have so many countries that surround us that have dengue as endemic, which means that it's present everywhere. You have, for example, Cuba, which you have a large population of people that travel back and forth between Miami and Cuba. You also have Brazil, and unfortunately there's a disease outbreak now in Puerto Rico. And we do have a large number of Puerto Rican residents that travel back and forth. So the travel cases mostly happen when a person goes abroad, they're bitten by an infected mosquito overseas, and then they come home with that virus in them. They get sick here. So we know that they've traveled, so we categorize that as a travel case. Now, unfortunately, travel cases from the year 2023 to 2024 increased by 70%. That's the bad news. The good news is that the local transmission, we've managed to really get our hands around it, and we've reduced those numbers by 40%. Now, the local transmission is when someone who hasn't traveled anywhere somehow winds up with a mosquito-borne illness. And so those cases, that happens when a mosquito that bites somebody else that's infected is able to bite them and then pass on that disease here in the United States. But again, the good news is that we've reduced those cases by 40%.
So how does the county find out about the mosquito population and what type of mosquitoes are in the county?
That's the easy answer is our surveillance program, and that means we're watching, we're keeping our eyes on the mosquito populations through a network of 320 traps that we have set out at any given moment out throughout the county. So in other words, where there are people, there's likely going to be a trap trap within a mile radius. So we've got a whole network that covers the entire county, and we're checking these traps on a weekly basis. Now, when I say check, I mean we have a catch bag. These traps, we're not using them to control the populations themselves or limit the number of mosquitoes. We're just simply using them to collect data about them. So once a week, we have this little bag that we have mosquitoes that are trapped in. So we bring this bag back to the lab. We freeze the mosquitoes, and we're able to count them. We're able to sort them by species. We're able to test some of them to see if they're encountering diseases. We're also able to see if there's new species of mosquitoes present.
So if you've got, let's say, a half a dozen of your traps in a certain area, and you go, gee, there's not much activity, or you go, and it's like massive amounts, you know that there's going to be a challenge for the homeowner coming up.
Right. That's a good indicator. If there's 10 or more mosquitoes in a given trap, we know that's high. That's an elevated number, and that's usually what triggers our truck spraying protocol.
So Michael, about 10 years ago, we kept hearing there's a certain type of mosquito that's over in Wynwood. And it's like, how do they know it's in Wynwood? And why isn't it also out of Wynwood? Tell us about why and how the county figured out it was mostly in Wynwood. What type of mosquito was that?
I believe you're talking about the invasive species Aedes aegypti.
Yes.
And we know that's the type of mosquito that's a container breeder. So that it relies on little containers of water, little pockets of water, maybe water that's pooling from a faulty air conditioning, or if there's a roof that has a pool of water that doesn't ever go away, and during the rainy season never really dries up. That's the sort of thing that attracts that mosquito. And naturally, our traps were picking all that up. Then there's other types of mosquitoes that only grow, that only thrive in the Everglades. So obviously that mosquito is not going to be found in Wynwood. Then there's the type of mosquito that maybe only flourishes in the mangroves. A little bit further, there's a little bit of a good amount of distance between the mangroves and Wynwood, so that's why we didn't see that type of mosquito in there. So, and wherever there's people, where there is a large concentration of people, this Aedes aegypti mosquito has evolved to thrive in that sort of situation.
Lots of people, all the mosquitoes are coming from the Everglades. And so that's not the case, though, is it?
No, it's not. They do come in, and we do find that type of mosquito in the traps that are located along the fringes, close to the urban development boundary. So we can see those there. But sometimes Mother Nature works her magic, and they get blown in on by a storm system or heavy winds. So that we'll find a mosquito that's usually prevalent in the Everglades. We'll find it in the urban areas sometimes.
How long does it take for nature to take back over to where the mosquitoes go back from where they're supposed to be?
It really does vary. We've seen hurricane seasons. We've seen a hurricane come through and just kind of eliminate the entire population. It washes out all the eggs that are in the ground waiting to be hatched, or it washes out all the eggs that are in the Everglades at a given point. And sometimes we've seen after hurricanes, the mosquito populations explode. So it really we don't know. We haven't quite figured that out yet. But we do know that large storms like that, heavy wind events, heavy rain events, they do have an effect. What they are, we don't know right away until after we've had a chance to study the population.
So often we're watching TV and we say, we can go get the mosquito zapper, right? Which is a thing like that, or this trap that you hang, it has the ultraviolet light in it, and you go and you buy the widget that's going to make them go over to us. So tell us about those things, and how effective are they?
Well, to a person like me on the inside, all those products are snake oil. They're not effective. Really, what we know works is the repellents that have been vetted and approved, and they are registered with the EPA. And those brands, I don't think I need to get into them. I think everyone knows which ones they are. But generally speaking, the ones that have the active ingredient of DEET, picaridin, oil of lemon eucalyptus, or IR 3535, we know those work.
But we feel better when we have that thing hanging there, and every once in a while we hear zip.
Yeah, right? you could feel better, but also know that some good bugs are getting zapped too. It's not all mosquitoes. Moths never hurt anybody, and they're getting it too.
And those little bugs are eaten by the little birds,
right?
As well. So if you have some of those bugs around your property, that you'll have more birds there eating that.
Right, Michael. And mosquitoes have feelings too. Not only do they have feelings, but they're part of the food chain. So they do serve as food for other birds, for bats, for example, for dragonflies. they do some good. But if you follow our advice, if you wear your repellent, if you cover your skin with long sleeves or pants or socks, you can reduce the amount of bites that will affect you.
So if somebody step outside, they go, man, I'm getting eaten up by bugs.
Run.
Right. Run. Or they could be mosquitoes.
Yeah.
But if somebody says, what can I do to get some help? They could call the county.
Yes.
So tell us about that process.
So you can either run or you can contact us, and we can send one of our wonderfully highly trained inspectors out to check and see where the problem is in your neighborhood. It could be something as simple as a container that we've discussed. It could be some bromeliads. Those are the types of plants that they're everywhere here in Florida, in Miami particularly, and that type of plant gathers water in its leaf structure. They often serve as breeding grounds.
So when you look at it, you say we have a trap near that area, and we had 20 mosquitoes in it, so we know there are a bunch. Do you therefore get phone calls from people in the neighborhood?
Yes.
There's a direct connection.
Yes, there is. We generally see when there's elevated trap counts that corresponds with people that are complaining about mosquitoes or are requesting mosquito inspections, which, by the way, you can do in 3 ways. You can either call 311, our 311 call center. They're very quick about getting you, opening up a service request and getting our inspector out to you within 1 to 2 business days. You can also request an inspection online at our website, miamidade.gov/mosquito, or there's a landing page that takes you, there's a special web address that takes you right to the 311 page. So if you type miamidade.gov/mosquito inspection, that takes you right to that page, or you can download and install one of several apps that leads you to either 311 or our Miami-Dade MDC solid waste app. Also, you can do
for
that.
The people that are uncomfortable online, again, they can just call 311 and they can arrange it that way.
Right.
Or if they want to have a good time, go. What's the address again?
miamidade.gov/mosquito.
All right. So. And also, the department's pretty active on social media. Tell us about that.
It is. We do try to reach people where they are, and to do that, we know that Facebook is still very much a source of information and news for people. So we try to post 3-4 times a day, even during holidays and weekends. So if people who are on Facebook can find us at facebook.com/305mosquito. We're also on X, which was formerly known as Twitter, at 305mosquito, and we do push quite a bit of content through on Instagram, which is also at 305mosquito.
So in the old days, I remember when I was in school, Michael, they would say, okay, the trucks would go down the street and, the big...
the foggers.
Yeah, it was actually pretty neat when you're a kid. Does that still occur?
Yeah, we do use trucks that we've mounted with specialty equipment. We don't use fog anymore. For the most part, what we do is we use a substance called BTI, which is short for Bacillus thuringiensis israeliensis. It's a type of bacteria that only kills mosquito larvae. So we've discovered over the years that the spores of that bacteria are very effective when you mix them in water and you spray a fine mist of it. This mist goes up in the air and it comes down into these standing water conditions, and that's good enough to limit mosquito breeding. Now we do that on as a preventive measure, but when we know that there's a lot of adult mosquitoes out biting, we are sending trucks to adulticide, which means we're targeting the adult mosquitoes. Now again, also the substance was vetted and approved and registered with the EPA. So it's not harmful to humans. I mean, I wouldn't jump into a 55-gallon drum of this stuff, but we're putting it in such a small quantity, and the droplets are so small that they only target mosquitoes. They only affect mosquitoes. So even if you happen to be out and about jogging, which is rare, unless a few of you are out there between 2 and 5 a.m., which is the times that these mosquitoes will be out on the street. These mosquito trucks would be out on the street. But even if you're out there, that cloud won't affect you.
Years ago, we used to hear about the mosquito plane.
Right.
Is that used anymore?
We don't use it very often. I think the last time we used it was in 2017, and it wasn't even this was after Zika, and it wasn't even for Zika mosquitoes. It was the nuisance mosquitoes that were so out of control that we had to spray the entirety of Homestead and a lot of the Naranja and South Dade area. So it was just easier, instead of trying to drive a truck on the streets and get to that much area, that much surface area, just to fly the plane. So we did that.
So when the plane is flying, it hasn't flown in many, many years. Mm-hmm. What's the height of the plane? How high up are they?
I believe it's a couple hundred feet.
Yeah,
it can't be that high because if you're too high, then the drift really gets affected. The winds push the pesticide out to where you don't want it to be, and so it has to be relatively low.
So looking down the road, what sort of new things might come up for mosquito control?
Well, I know that there's a lot of different districts around us that are using genetically modified mosquitoes. There are also breeding mosquitoes in a lab that already have the bacteria called Wolbachia in it, which renders mosquito eggs infertile. Our neighbors now, just directly to the west of Collier County mosquito, they're using irradiated mosquitoes, which means the male mosquitoes are dosed with a low-grade radiation. They're hit with a low-grade radiation, and then that renders them infertile. So they're going out and mating with females, and then the eggs that are coming out, they aren't hatching. So that's very promising.
So that's to help manage it, because we know we're not going to be able to get rid of all of that.
No, and we're not trying to get rid of all mosquitoes, because again, as we discussed earlier, you're taking the mosquito out of the food chain and you're negatively affecting other species. So we don't want to do that. That's why we're not called mosquito eradication, mosquito eradicator division.
So
it's
they're
the control
an essential
division.
part of this whole thing.
They are.
Right?
They're part of the food chain.
And just like if there were too many other widgets, you can figure out how to sort of control that.
Right. And I think if we're focused on really limiting the disease spreaders too, the Aedes aegypti mosquito, that's on our radar. Those are in our sights. Most of the other mosquitoes that exist in Florida don't really bite humans, so they're not really of concern. But the ones that we're really looking after are the ones that transmit disease, and those are the ones that we're going after aggressively.
And what can we as consumers and residents of Miami-Dade County do to assist you and the department in trying to manage the mosquito population?
It really is as simple as trying to limit the areas in your backyard that they can breed. And really, if you're having an issue, call us. It's a service that doesn't carry an additional fee. You're already covering us. We're general funded, so the money is already there for us. You're not going to get a bill. We're not going to put you on some sort of, we're not going to send you an invoice. We're not going to charge you anything extra. It's part of the services that are already offered to taxpayers. So we urge you to take advantage of them. Call us. Let us help you.
So we have a lot of auricas on our perimeter. Every once in a while, I'll tell the landscaper, rake it all out. Let's see what's back there. And everything in the world is back along there. And then we recognize there's enough things that can have a small reservoir of water so the mosquitoes having a field day.
Right. And just to clarify, they may not be breeding in the arecas, the little tiny palm trees, but they do take shade. They are using them for shelter from the rain, or female mosquitoes need to rest after they've taken a blood meal. So a lot of times they wind up there in your arecas. So
let's talk about a blood meal. Michael, explain what a blood meal is for people that don't know.
Yeah. So mosquitoes, they don't use blood to carry on to take nutrients from it for themselves. They're very much like bees. They're pollinators, right? They look for, and they do help flowers get pollen from one plant to another. They're taking the sugar water. That's how they feed themselves. The blood meal is something that only the female does, and she does it to extract the protein out of it and use that to make her eggs. So the blood meal refers to the female mosquito taking the blood from a human or from an animal and using that blood to perpetuate their life cycle.
Female mosquito lives about how long?
The female, about 21 days. 21 days. She lives the max. Isn't that just on brand, isn't it? Right?
And how many eggs might a mosquito that lives 21 days lay?
It could be in the thousands. Right. She could lay, depending on the species, several hundred in one sitting.
In one sitting.
Sometimes, just a few dozen on a little raft. But it really depends on the species. But it's quite a bit.
I think the term is, what's the gestation period of these eggs?
They'll hatch in 1 or 2 days. Once they hit the water, it's not long at all.
And for verification, mosquitoes can lay eggs near water, and they can be there for a long time. And when the water rises, right, it triggers them to hatch.
Right. And just for clarification, there's nothing the county can do to bring down the price of mosquito eggs, just in case anyone's wondering out there.
Very funny. I like that. Right. So again, people can go to their favorite store and buy what type of product can put on their
anything with the active ingredient of DEET. There's several really good brands. I don't want to tip my hand and endorse any one over another. But I like to get the type that has DEET in the little wipes, the almost like the wet naps from you get any fast food place that sells chicken wings, but the actual DEET is in this little wet napkin, and the application is much smoother than spraying, and it's water based. A lot of these brands are water based, so it doesn't go on greasy.
So we know mosquitoes are year round. Certainly, there's a time when there's more and a little bit less. When is, like, if you will, is there a peak season, and when is that?
Yes, there is. There isn't a mosquito season because mosquitoes are able to thrive here in South Florida throughout the year. But there is a peak season, and that happens. It coincides with the rainy season. So anytime between May and November, when you tend to have more of those daily rainstorms, especially during the summer, that's when it gets worse. Right now, it's all quiet on the Miami-Dade front. Mosquito numbers in our traps are low. The service requests for mosquito inspections are low, but come April, that first really big blast of rain that comes through, that's when the fun begins.
We got 5 seconds left, so people should enjoy this time, right, and be ready.
Yes.
Michael Mut, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Michael.
Appreciate it. And we're going to look in the red camera right over there. Michelle, thank you very much for producing the show. Again, folks.